Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Davida Paul. I'm from Nigeria, and I am extremely happy to be on here with everyone during this workshop. The workshop is titled The Art of Personal Feedback, and I really feel that the value in providing very good feedback cannot be overemphasized. The structure for today is going to be understanding the need, first of all, to provide holistic and thorough personal feedback to teams. Secondly, we're going to be exploring what personal feedback really is, particularly how it contributes to the development of debaters. Next, we're going to be looking at essential steps and trying as much as possible to give a very good personal feedback. And I think this workshop is going to be particularly helpful for not just adjudicators, who, of course, are going to be the primary ones giving the feedback anyway, but even for debaters as well, who just want to know what to look out for. Um, you can even use this to craft questions and asking judges when you're receiving personal feedback from them as well. I decided against slides because I wanted this to be super informal and simple. So if you've got a pair of listening ears and perhaps a notepad and a pen, I think you'd find this session very helpful. All right, then, so let's get into it. Um, why personal feedback? I believe that personal feedback is absolutely important to the development of a debater, particularly because it will probably be the most prep that debaters do during tournaments. Most of the preparation that debaters do has to be pre-tournament. You know, you're running all your snap debates, you're preparing all these huge case files. Universities are in the process of selecting teams. You're reading as much material as you can. You're watching as many materials as you can, right? And there's so little room for you to actually pause during tournaments and assess yourself, just properly evaluate your performances and be like, hey, in the middle of all these chaos, the rounds back to back, you know, um, a PAUDC, right? At EUDC, you could have up to 8 to 9 rounds. You've got all these rounds back to back. There's so much pressure. It might be very hard to try to pause and evaluate your performance at such a high pressure environment. And that's why personal feedback becomes essential. Because in the hustle and bustle between the last round ending, you know, you're getting a fifth or a fourth announced and having to hurry to your next round. This simple things, this short rounds of personal feedback that you receive from your judges could be the difference between you repeating a mistake down 6, 7 preliminary rounds later, and maybe even missing the finals, right? So it genuinely cannot be overemphasized. And that's why it's important that we have a session in this. I also think that because of the pressure of the environment as well, debaters are not the only ones um, um, who come under that pressure, by the way, because most adjudicators are worried about saying the wrong things to debaters because you don't want to say the wrong thing, perhaps scold the debater too much, and that affects your judge score. That affects whether you break or not. And if you ask the average judge, they're probably pretty clueless on what a thorough personal feedback looks like. Most people will use the clue, oh, hey, I'll pass this on to you later, and actually never do, which really dampens morale, right? So it's really, really important that both the adjudicators and debaters know what to look out for when it comes to personal feedback during tournaments, but presumably this could be useful for every sphere as well. The art of personal feedback is something that doesn't just begin post round, it actually starts pre-tournament, if you ask me. And I'm going to be talking about the mindset that adjudicators should have when going into tournaments, especially at majors such as EUDC and PAUDC as well. But it also crosses on into when the debate is actually happening. All right. You've got to be super critical about how you're taking notes. I mean, I cannot stress this enough. If you do not take notes, in the way that you're supposed to, it would definitely affect the quality of your personal feedback later on. So this literally cannot be overemphasized. I think it's super important that we talk about that as well. And then, of course, we're going to go on to the structure of personal feedback, what they should typically look like. Of course, with so many allowances for your personal style and preference for structure as well. So the next thing then is what should be the mentality that educators should have concerning personal feedback. Please remember that at the start, I said that uh, the art of personal feedback actually extends beyond the tournament itself. It dates back to pre-tournament. And I think it's important that educators everywhere, especially at majors like this, just have the mentality around the work ethic and sacrifice that teams put into preparing for majors and into giving such great speeches, okay? Because if we understand, appreciate, and respect how much effort debaters put into preparing for tournaments such as this, it's easier to be motivated to do the right thing by them when it comes to note taking, when it comes to mannerism, when it comes to the ethics of providing personal feedback, and when it comes to, being willing to dedicate time and effort, considerable effort, into making sure that you try as much as possible to contribute to your growth and development in this not so little way as well. So the first thing is just really building the correct mentality, understanding that teams who are preparing for majors, who are debating at majors, have put in so much work to be chosen probably from across dozens, or scores of excellent debaters in their institutions and to have been chosen to represent those institutions as well. If you understand and appreciate the effort they put, it automatically just motivates you and inspires you to put in as much effort as you can as well into making sure that you're able to do your own part in their growth and development during the tournament as well. So that was the very first element. Please remember to understand and appreciate the work that debaters put into preparing for these events, okay? And especially if you're it doesn't really matter if you're an independent adjudicator or an institutional adjudicator. You could also just be cognizant of all of the expenses and efforts that are going into your presence at the tournament in order to help you fulfill your role as an adjudicator, right? If you're an RA, you're probably having the tournament cover a certain proportion of your expenses at the tournament, which is significant when you really look at the budget of majors and just any competition in general. Even if you're funded by your institution, that's a sport that could have gone to anyone else. So I think that if you do recognize not just the effort that debaters are putting in to giving wonderful speeches at tournaments, but you're also cognizant as well of all the efforts that are being put to make sure that you're comfortable enough to fulfill your role. I think it just inspires you to put in enough work up to a certain required standard to make sure that the tournament goes smoothly and is a productive experience for everyone. All right, then. Now we're going to go on to the next stage of personal feedback. And this is what I call um, listening and note-taking stage. And this happens during the actual tournament, during the actual rounds. It's really, really important to listen. And I know like this is something I've said too many times, and you probably hear it many more times as well, but this also cannot be overemphasized. You've got to listen attentively during the debate. And this is why I encourage all adjudicators, regardless of whether you're new or not, to always write while a speaker is up there giving their speeches. It doesn't matter what your personal opinion of that speaker is. It doesn't matter if you think they're not good. It doesn't matter if you think, this one deserves my attention. They're probably an 80s, maybe 90s speaker, whereas someone is a 60s, 70s speaker and doesn't deserve your note. It really doesn't matter what your individual perception of that speaker is. And that's why the mentality is important, right? Because if you recognize that regardless of whoever they are, they've put in considerable effort into preparing for that tournament, it just encourages you to do the right thing, which is to actively listen to what is being said. And this is a major precursor for good note taking. So please make sure that you listen attentively to all speakers, even the things you don't really care about, even the things that you don't particularly have a preference for in debating. In fact, I would encourage you to write down the things you think they're doing wrong, because that's the easiest way to be able to refer back and point it out to them when you're giving personal feedback. Like, hey, you did this, you said this, and I don't think it's particularly right of you to do so. It's just easier to point out flaws in their arguments if you're writing them down to begin with. So the first rule there after listening is just to make sure that you take as thorough notes as possible. The next thing as well is clarity. And this also cannot be overemphasized. So apparently every point is important. But I think that clarity is super important. I will not attempt to give you a hardcore way to structure your notes. And these are most of the reasons why I decided against slides anyway, because I realized that so many people have unique styles of adjudicating and they have unique styles of note taking as well. So it'd be pointless to try to give you a structure. But I think it's really, really important that no matter what works for you, you prioritize clarity in your note taking. If you're someone who's predisposed to writing on your device, writing on your laptop, fine. If you're someone who will fare better by taking handwritten notes, that also works as well. We generally discourage people from using their phones, so if you've got permission from TAB, you've got permission from CAs to use digital devices, then sure, you can do that, but probably not your phones, right? There's always just the element of distraction as well. But regardless of what format works for you, please make sure that you are prioritizing very clear notes. Clear notes. I know so many adjudicators who will get like several pieces of paper and write down each team's case on each separate sheet. Some go as far as getting 2, 3, 4 pieces of A4 paper per team just to maximize clarity. Some will draw squares on an A4 paper. Some will have different highlighters, some will have different colored pens just to enhance clarity. So what I'm going to encourage you to do as an adjudicator is find what works for you and make sure that it gives you the clearest notes possible. And I'm going to quickly talk about why that's important. Impacting, like debaters would say. So the reason why this is extremely important as well for you to take clear notes is that there's often so much pressure on the adjudicator during personal feedback. And I'm going to speak to this when we get to the ethics at the end of the session. Okay, on how people should approach personal feedback, especially debaters in asking and receiving personal feedback. But there could be so much pressure when you have to provide personal feedback, even OAs as well, that generally things that you think you remember begin to just fleet out of your mind and fleet out of your consciousness, okay? And you're having to like scramble and look for papers. If you're not taking clear notes, it's likely that you will scramble, you will stutter a lot, you will basically lose your steez, as the Gen Z will say, right? And that's very, very inefficient. But if you've got clear notes, even when that pressure comes and it's hard to track what you think you accurately remember, if you've got very clear notes, it would be very easy to refer to them when you need to as well. And secondly, sometimes as an adjudicator, you will have debaters question your version of events. Excuse me. You will have debaters question your version of events. And that's why it's important that you clearly track speeches. Okay, you've got clearly defined notes. It's just easier to sort out confusions when you first of all written down things that they've said and you've done this in a clear way as well. However, there is a balance, okay? And I do not want, for example, novice judges listening to this workshop to presume that what I'm saying is write down every single thing that you hear. That would be practically impossible to do. And that's why you need to find out what works for you, right? My recommendation, however, should be that every general line of argument should be reflected in your notes for sure. Every general line of analysis should be represented in your notes as well. Every general line of impacting should be reflected in your notes. Every general line of clashes, rebuttals, responses, maybe even examples can be reflected in your notes. When you make track of this in your notes, it doesn't necessarily have to be word for word or maybe full sentences, depending on your writing speed. It could be phrases for the argumentation. It could be phrases for the pieces of analysis. It could be phrases for rebuttals and engagement. Whatever you're able to just take a look at your paper and be like, yeah, I remember this person said this from what you've written down is definitely encouraged. So yeah, remember there's a balance. You're not being asked to write down every single word that speaker utters. That would definitely be impossible in 7 minutes speech. But you should definitely be writing down all the core elements. And because this is largely subjective, it would be great if you followed my recommendation, regardless of what you personally regard as important. Just write down major lines of argumentations and all the forms, that they come in. Okay. So just a recap for now. First thing we've talked about intentionality and the kind of mindset that you go into tournaments with. Secondly, we've talked about the importance of listening actively during debate speeches. And now we're on to note taking. The first thing we've said on note taking is to emphasize clarity in what you write down. Okay. The second thing as well is being very, very thorough. And I think I've touched on this a bit in the first point about clarity. Like I said, you do not have to write down every single thing that's been said, but it's really important that your notes are thorough. Don't worry, you're never going to run out of paper. And this is something I appreciate tournaments for. Both the ones that I've attended within Africa and the ones I've been privileged to attend outside of Africa as well. There's always provisions of writing materials, always provisions of spare pieces of paper as well. So that's nothing you have to worry about really. Just make sure that you take accurate notes as well. Okay, so the third thing under this, in addition to being clear and being thorough, that's really, really important, is the structure. And I think that it's always important to um, draw out the contributions of speakers based on key clashes that happened within the round. Because usually the kind of questions you're going to get from debaters is, oh, so how do you think I could have won this clash? How do you think I could have placed over this team? What do you think they did better than I did? And that's why it's important to have an accurate understanding of clashes and how they work within rounds. So just to put it really simply, when you're looking at clashes within a debate, you're looking at core questions that determine the direction of your decision. Okay, you another word in parliamentary talk is this a voting issue? Is this something I could cast my ballot for? Is this something I could cast my vote? Is this something I could cast my vote on? That understanding of clashes is super important for the kind of questions you typically get when debaters request personal feedback as well. So it's really important that you understand what clashes are and you're able to make strategic notes across that line. Of course, depending on whatever structure works for you, as we've talked about, as we talked about earlier. Okay. I think it would also be amazing to watch as many debates as possible if you're a novice judge, because honestly, the best way to learn these things is by practice. Try as much as possible to watch rounds of debate. And, I'm thankful to people like Martha, they've got so many resources online. It's really important to go online, look for those materials, watch this debate, and try to draw out the clashes from the round. You will most likely not get online debate videos having OAs been published as well, but most likely you will get the actual debate speeches being published as well, which does you a lot of good because then you can be able to watch really high quality debates and be able to draw out lines of clashes by yourself. Okay, when you've done that, you can feel free to walk up to pro adjudicators that you know. Okay, most of them are pretty nice. You could feel free to get into my DM as well and be like, hey, these are the clashes that I thought um, um, were predominant in this debate. You know, what do you think? Do you have similar thoughts? Point is, the best way to do this is to practice. During your spars as well, if you're coming as an institutional judge, you know, sign up to judge spar debates for your institution. Practice drawing out the clashes from those rounds, because that's typically the kind of feedback that debaters would expect from you, that you are able to draw out core clashes, you're able to critically evaluate whether a debater has won a second clash, how they could have done better at defeating another team under a second clash as well. Okay, so this sort of leads me into the next point, which is what kind of questions are you likely to expect and how do you answer them? So this is just more practical, to be honest. So the first question, and this is pretty basic. Most people who request for personal feedback will start with this. They'll be like, okay, so what do you think I did well and how can I improve? I think this is the most basic form of personal of question that people who are desirous of personal feedback often ask. They'll say, okay, just tell me what I did well and tell me how I can improve. Okay, so and this is my advice, right? It's a pretty tense moment. You've probably just given them a first, maybe a fourth. Okay, so it's pretty tense. So my advice would be to always start with the positive comments first. Okay, try to highlight what they did well. Okay, and this is where we'll really go into what constructive comments look like. First, constructive comments and not flattery. Is that an opportunity for you to tell people, oh, I absolutely love your accent. You sound really good. It's not an opportunity to tell them, oh, I think you just give a very exciting, flowery speech. It's not a time to flatter them endlessly. Okay, oh, I think you're an 80s speaker, or I think you're a 90s speaker. That's not a very constructive comment. Okay, so please do not mistake comment about what they did well as an opportunity for flattery. That's not helpful to them. That at best boosts their ego a little bit. And I think that's something else you could do probably during socials or outside of rounds. But I think if you're really looking to provide really helpful comments for them, you should dwell on what they did well. So here's what they did well comments look like. First thing is, oh, I think you had very excellent um, team synergy with your partner. That's a good comment. And that's something you always want to watch out for. Okay. So if you're a second speaker, do they support your partner really well? Do they case rebuild in a way that strengthens the case of the team? Or are they someone who's just trying to hijack all the attention and speaker scores for themselves and really not trying to do the job of being a supportive second partner to their first? Okay. If they're first, you're saying, is this person making the job much more difficult for his or her partner by being very vague and ambiguous, or by improperly defining the motion? Okay, these are things you want to watch out for. If they're fast from say CG or CO, you're asking yourself, did this person knife, did this person try to throw the entire debate away, make it into a definitional challenge? Those are the kind of things you're looking for when you're looking at team synergy and your strength as a partnership. Okay, you could say, oh, I think you're a really great second speaker, or hey, I think maybe you should try going fast if you're in CO or in CG, because I've noticed that you're really able to like explain all the argumentations well, and that's not so necessary in WIP, because it appears as though you're bringing up new material or new argumentation. Those are the kind of comments that you want to provide when you're talking about what they did well. Of course, you can also speak to their structure as well and their content. You could say, oh, I could see you've got no problems with argument generation. I really like the arguments that you provided within the round. I thought that they were super well structured. I thought that they were well developed, you had great examples, you were able to properly analyze this in a way that was very easy to understand. Those are the kind of comments they're looking for that are actually very helpful to them. Makes them just very conscious about things that they can safely repeat in the next round that you're about to step into. Not, oh, I really love your accent. Oh, you're such a great speaker. Oh, can you coach me some other time? Yeah, these are not the kind of comments that are particularly helpful um, for for debaters who are coaching you. Okay. The next thing you want to talk about as well is just how they do in terms of strategy. Okay. So you want to look at um, how effective they are when it comes to refutation and rebuttals. And I think this will be super important no matter the speaker that's coming to you. Okay. So you want to ask yourself, did this speaker do a good job of rebutting the cases of the other teams? Did he do it clearly? Did he do this in a way that I could say he completely deconstructed this material? Or was there something he could have done better? Those are the kind of things that you want to look out for when providing Um, personal feedback to speakers as well. Okay, so just a brief recap on this particular question. The first thing, please do not flatter. Okay, flattery helps absolutely no one. You want to make sure that you are actually providing comments that are super helpful to their development. You want to look at how they did within a team and how effective they were in their personal role fulfillment. Okay, you want to make sure that this person fulfilled their role pretty well. If they're prime minister, they properly defined the notion in a way that was very clear, in a way that did not leave room for so much ambiguity and room for so many definitional challenges up until the end of the debate. If their opposition whip, you want to make sure that this person did not introduce new material. This person did not try to knife the debate from closing, okay, in a way that was very unfair and very uncharitable. You want to make sure that this person completely fulfilled their role, no matter what position that they stood in, right? And I said the second thing as well is that you wanted to look at how they performed, particularly within their team. Okay, you want to make recommendations about whether they should remain in that position or whether they could try going first or try and go in second. And please, there's a lot of discretion that has to be employed with making suggestions like this. Okay, so do not casually go around suggesting to people to change their positions if you're not very confident about this. Okay, and I think this generally comes with experience and perhaps even debater experience as well in terms of being able to sense where a speaker would better perform. If you're not very sure while making this kind of suggestions, I would advise that you probably just stick to talking about what they could do really well in the kind of rules that they have fixed. Because oftentimes I'm very aware that debaters will go into majors with fixed positions like, hey, if we're in opening, I'm always going to go first, but if we're in closing, then I'm always going to go second. So you want to be very careful about making this kind of suggestions if you're not altogether sure. All right then. So just these are examples, right, of constructive comments that could be really helpful. I think another thing that definitely won't hurt is style. And I know that this is probably not a very big deal in British parliamentary debating. It's just much more rampant in other formats like WSDC. But I think that to an extent, it does add a lot of flair when it comes to speaker points as well, and in terms of persuasion. So it's never a bad idea to tell them, hey, I really like your style. I thought that your use of humor and rhetoric made your case very easy to follow. Okay, you can definitely emphasize points of clarity. Did you think your speech was clear enough? Did you think they spoke in a way that made it easy for you to follow what they were saying? You can definitely point this out to them by saying, hey, I really think you were clear. Or if they were not, hey, I don't think you did so well on clarity. I think um here's how you can improve this. I think, for example, that you could make use of more examples. It definitely makes your case come alive. I think you could spend more time analyzing. I noticed you spend too little time just highlighting what your argument was and quickly moving on to the next one. So these are the kind of things that you want to watch out for. Okay. So going on then to the next part of this question, which is, would you think I could have done better? And this is really, really where your notes will come into place. Because while some of the constructive comments, you may not need to make reference to your notes because it's just their general mannerism in terms of, oh, did they fulfill their role? Were they super engaging on a general level? How was team partnership and synergy? Majority of your answers to the second question on what I could have done better will be very, very note heavy. Okay, so you need to make sure that you take very detailed notes because that's how you can better answer their question. And the reason as well why note taking is important in this segment is because you need to be able to pinpoint um, you need to be able to pinpoint in your notes areas that you think that they weren't particularly good in, where their flaws are. And I'm going to tell you why it's easier to do why it's easier to do the more nice comments better than this. Oftentimes, when you tell debaters, especially debaters who have just taken a fourth and are not very okay about it, things that you don't think they did well, they might challenge you on that. And I'm going to talk about ethics very soon because ordinarily they shouldn't. Adjudicators should get the same courtesy that they get during OA, during personal feedback. But oftentimes that's not the case because it's usually like out of the very serious debating context. So they might push back on that. They might challenge a bit and say, no, I don't think I said that. No, I don't think I did that. Oh, didn't you hear me give this rebuttal? Or didn't you hear me give, didn't you hear this POI? Or didn't you hear this analysis or impact? And that's why you need to take accurate notes because you could say, oh, I get what you're saying. I think you tried to, but this is actually what you ended up saying. Okay. It wasn't as well explained during your speech like you're explaining it now. It's just easier to be able to to measure up to these challenges when you have accurate notes as well. And that's why it's really, really important for these segments that you're able to directly tie everything you're saying that they didn't do particularly well back to your notes, indicating what they have said and what they have not said in the debate room. Okay, so for this, it has to be very extensive. And I will always tell judges use examples. So if, for example, touche, if for, if for example, you tell them, I think that your rebuttals could have been better, then you need to be able to go back to your notes and tell them, this was the rebuttal you gave. Here's how I think it could have been better. I think that you could have I think that you could have rebutted your case better. This is what you said. Here is how I think you can make it better. It's super, super, super important to always make references when going back, to this, okay? And that's also a tip as well, because when you tell debaters that you think they could do something better, please try to make sure that as much as possible, to the best of your ability, you actually indicate how you think they could make that, how you think they could make that better. For example, you're telling them a rebuttal they made wasn't as great. You could highlight something in the opposition speech that they missed. That was a super important link to their argument, and why the speaker you're giving personal feedback to had to make sure to defeat that link in order to completely deconstruct the argument. That's an active way of making sure that you're helping them do better. If you're talking about case rebuilding and you're like, oh, I don't think you provided extensions as second speaker, open in half. Okay. And you're like, no, I don't think you provided extensions. And while you did a really good job rebutting and case rebuilding, it would have been really, really great um, if you gave some extensions as well. Give some examples of extensions, okay? Please never feel shy to do that. That's the difference between oral adjudication and personal feedback. This would not be permissible in OAs because you're expected to stick strictly to what happened during the debate. But when it's personal feedback, you're trying to contribute to their growth and development for future rounds, presumably for future tournaments as well. So please feel free to exercise this freedom to provide provide ideas, concrete ideas of what you think they could have done better. You could say, oh, you could have looked at different stakeholders on this. You could have added a new stakeholder to the clashes in the opening half, or you could have better impacted in this way, or you could have given more examples, or you could have just given analytical extensions of what your partner already said, just concrete ways in terms of making sure that they are actually leaving the room, they're actually leaving you with to-dos at your next round, at the next debate in general. So please make sure that you're actually making recommendations as well. And this is why you also have to do your own research, because I know that as adjudicators, you can get very laid back. You don't feel like you've got to prepare as much as debaters have got to. There's no need for you to have case files. There's no need for you to watch Ben Shapiro and prepare all of your materials as well. There's no need for you to even do spas, but that's not exactly great because it doesn't really help you for providing personal feedback. I believe that um, the best debaters are well-rounded individuals. Still try to watch the news, still try to keep abreast of what's happening, still try to routinely look around for great materials. Sure, the best judge is supposed to be, an average independent voter who doesn't have too much spec knowledge on any issue. I mean, I personally don't even think that's what the manuals are saying anyway. It's just that you keep those spec knowledge, you keep that spec knowledge aside when you enter the debate room, when it's time to adjudicate, right? And you just solely judge on what is being said. But all of this information, all of this knowledge is definitely going to be incredibly helpful when you've got to give personal feedback. That's where that's where you just feel much more emboldened to be able to actually give suggestions to debaters on what they could do better, what arguments they could have raised, what further examples they could have given. You're able to point out the problem in the examples. So even if you do not use this to judge a debate by saying, hey, I know this, I know your example is wrong. That's why even if the other teams not pointed out, I marked you down. You can do that during OA, but you can say, like, bruh, I know this example. That was a wrong example. This is the accurate knowledge in this subject. So it definitely doesn't hurt to be well-rounded. Read your materials, watch those YouTube videos, read papers. I mean, I personally don't read physical newspapers, but some people do. They find it very helpful than going through blogs. If that's also a cake for you, you can subscribe, you know, to newsletters, to New York Times, just anything that could help you be knowledgeable about tips to give off as well. Okay, so that's broadly um, the kind of question that you would receive from debaters. So just a recap on this section as well in terms of how they did well. We've talked about note taking again, and the emphasis here was always to refer back to your notes when you're trying to point out flaws in a debater's speech. Okay, you do not want to highlight of the errors of a particular debater and have them challenge you, and now you're suddenly not so sure that they said this or not. Okay, so it's really, really important that you have your notes to refer back to, but also because you want to build on whatever has been given within that. Okay, all right then. So now the next thing to get to would be the ethics of uh personal feedback. And again, yes, this cannot be overemphasized. Okay, I personally feel like equity teams are doing a great job at making sure that the interactions between debaters and adjudicators at tournaments, especially majors, continue to remain very respectful. Okay, because yeah, it do get heated. It do get heated sometimes. Uh, so let's talk about a couple of things, right? The first thing is be professional. And this goes for both the adjudicator and the debater who's seeking personal feedback as well. Be professional. Do not use derogatory words at judges uh, because they've gotten the fourth and you're swearing and you're like, why did you give me a fourth? You know, uh, you're not even open to receiving whatever feedback they've got for you if you're unprofessional to begin with, right? So, regardless of the feeling, regardless of the sentiment at that point in time, please make sure that you remain strictly professional. Personal feedback or an extension of debate rounds. Do not think that it's suddenly a social gathering and you can be disrespectful to a judge as well. I'm even going to correct that because even if it's a social gathering, even if it's seen as more informal than what actually goes on in the debate room, because you might be meeting the judge much later. Okay, it's really, really important that you're respectful to them at all times and you're very, very professional in the way that you approach them. Please not use derogatory words. Be respectful of them. These are judges who have spent an hour just listening to you and taking no one else would do that for you in your day-to-day life. Like no one will follow you around just taking notes of everything you're saying. Okay. And these are people who have carved out time to do that for you. So it's important that in the same way they've acknowledged your efforts by listening to you and taking notes, you also acknowledge their efforts as well and be professional. You listen when they're giving you personal feedback and take notes as well. I've got several debaters who walk up to me, and while I'm giving OA or personal feedback, like they're actually taking notes as well. So please respect them. I'm not saying you have to take notes, but at least do them the courtesy of listening to them as well. The second thing about ethics is keep an open mind. And part of keeping an open mind means allowing them speak. Okay, so you cannot turn it into a back and forth or into a challenge when you're trying to give personal feedback to when you're trying to receive personal feedback from a judge. Okay, so they've barely got two sentences in and you're like, no, wait, that's not what I said. No, you've definitely misunderstood this. Wait, how can you say that? Keep an open mind. Let them finish their thoughts. Let them complete their sentences. And of course, there's always the avenue for questions, right? So after they've completed their thought, after they've summarized a particular point, you can then say, oh, I appreciate that, but I don't really think this is what I said. Did you hear me say this and this? That's more respectful. That's more the attitude of someone who is open to actually receiving correction and who is open to hearing the opinions of what they've got to say. Okay. So it's I'm not saying completely bottle up how you feel inside as a debater, for instance, but just do them the courtesy of hearing them out first. And then of course you can go on to their questions. I would like to assume, I would like very much for this to be the case that all adjudicators are good, and great. But I know that sadly this may not always be the case. But regardless, please just give them that courtesy of an open mind. Okay. And if you feel like they haven't particularly done an excellent job, take out your frustration on the feedback sheet. We CAs are definitely going to read that. We CAs are definitely going to take that into consideration when we're breaking judges or not. Okay, don't take the frustration out on them physically by harassing them during personal feedback. Please don't do that. Take the frustration out on your phone. Type aggressively all you want. We will take our time to read all of your feedback. Okay, all of your judge feedback when you submit this as well. Just don't do that physically to the judge. That could literally mar their entire experience throughout the majors. That could literally make them feel terrible about themselves and about their quality. So please try as much as possible to desist from this. Okay. Try as much as possible to be professional and to keep an open mind as well. And yes, again, this cannot be overemphasized. This is super important. Not only are you making the tournament a safe space for everyone, um you're also just building your character as a person. Heck, guys, this could be a workshop for character development and stuff. Okay, so the final thing that I wanted to talk about on this as well is judges, because I realized that this is more debater weighted. Adjudicators, please do not rush feedback, and please do not look down on debaters as well during this time. You're not allowed to be condescending in your tone, okay? These are not your children. And we've had instances of this where educators just speak really rudely to debaters. And it really doesn't matter what your personal perception of them is, whether you think they're worthy enough, for our really old and wonderful adjudicators who have been years and years in the sport, and you've got novice debaters coming to meet you to say, hey, what did you think I did wrong? What did you think I could improve on? Please not be condescending in the way that you speak to them. They're equally deserving of your attention as top speakers, as the people who most likely be top 10 speakers as well. So please don't be condescending. Give them your time as well. Of course, there is a balance when it comes to time management. Your personal feedback, and I was gonna talk about this as the last thing when I talk about the technicalities of it. But I'm just gonna highlight it right now anyway. Please do not turn personal feedback into another OA or another debate. Your personal feedback should not be taken up to half an hour. People have got debates to get to, particularly if this is within rounds. You should make sure that you're keeping your personal feedback to a time constraint. We generally do not advocate for a particular time. We're giving personal feedback, but if this is during rounds, 10 to 20 minutes, maybe even less, you should be done. Okay. So please make sure that you're not turning times for OA into half an hour or an hour. Because if you come complain to us then that, hey, this particular debater was very disrespectful to me. They said they had to go or they walked out when I was giving them personal feedback, and we asked you how long it took and you're telling us 45 minutes. Yeah, we definitely won't pay much attention to that, even if that's an equity complaint, right, guys? So please make sure that you're very, very particular about time. All right, then. So quickly to the technicalities of personal feedback. This usually happens immediately post round, but oftentimes because of logistics, maybe the next round is in 5 minutes, or we're running behind on schedule, or people have got to go to break announcement, or it's a silent round, and there isn't so much you can say without giving away the decision. It is very, very helpful to try as much as possible to allocate a separate time for giving personal feedback. Okay, you can exchange contact. Say, I will do this via text, via voice note, or can we get on a call later tonight to do this? That's completely fine. Because I know that so many of my examples have been post round because of all the pressure that comes with it. But note that personal feedback can literally happen at any point. It could happen just immediately after the round. It could happen the next day. It could happen after the tournament as well. Okay. And that leads me to the next point on technicalities. Do not be in a hurry to delete your notes or throw away your notes, right? If you're writing down. I know that there's so many papers and you don't want to have to deal with so many papers at a tournament. But until you're done giving personal feedback to every team, please do not be in a hurry to throw away your notes. What I personally do is try to, unless I've immediately given personal feedback to everyone, I try to save my notes for the duration of the entire tournament. Okay. And if after the tournament, maybe a week no one has come in, I would definitely trash those. Okay. Alternatively, if you're someone who would like to keep notes but doesn't like the stack of papers, get a journal. Okay. It's easier to keep all your notes in a journal without feeling the need to dispose of them. Okay. If you're using on your phone or a tablet, don't be in a hurry to delete those because you never know when they will reach out, right? I mean, so long as it's not unreasonable and they're reaching out to you after a month or two of the tournament. So it's really, really advisable that you try to hold on to your notes for a reasonable amount of time. We've got very sticky scenarios where judges are asked for personal feedback and they're like, yeah, I don't have my papers anymore. I can't find my notes. Or then you just sort of use a disguise and you keep posting debaters because you know you don't have the personal feedback you're looking for because you can't find your notes, you've discarded your papers. So second point of technicalities, please try as much as possible to go into your papers for a decent period of time, at least for the entire duration of the tournament, and then slightly afterwards as well. Okay. That's all I've got for technicalities. Please do not put any pressure on yourselves beyond what is expected. I think that insofar as you're professional, you're respectful, you don't particularly have to worry about being under any pressure, especially if you do all I've recommended, right? Especially if you've listened attentively, you've taken detailed notes, you know, you're a well-rounded debater who can actually provide very helpful feedback, very helpful examples of how to be better to teams, then you shouldn't have any problems generally with this. So a quick recap of all we've learned in this workshop. The first thing that I said, I stress the importance of personal feedback. Yes, and again, there's that word. It really cannot be overemphasized, that phrase. It really cannot be overemphasized. This is most likely the greatest form and the greatest avenue of development that debaters will have during a tournament. Majority of their prep and before the tournament, after doing 3, 4 rounds a day, you're just trying to get dinner and go to bed so you can wake up refreshed for the next day. You're It's highly unlikely that you will still pouring through case files and materials the same way you do pre-tournament. It's unlikely that you're doing spars um, during the tournament as you would do pre the tournament. So please not underestimate how valuable personal feedback is to teams during a tournament. Okay, and then next we talked about the mentality that you've absolutely got to have, um, especially as an adjudicator. You must recognize, appreciate, respect the effort that debaters have put into getting selected, you know, to represent their institutions, all of the reading and studying that they've got to do, you know, in order to be standing there before you presenting their speeches. It could definitely um, shape your motivation and inspiration to do most of the things that we talk about in this workshop. Next, we've talked about actively listening to speeches, regardless of your individual perception as to how they're doing, regardless of whether you think they're worth your attention or not. Please take notes, okay? Don't destroy their morale, by the way. That's something that also really destroys morale. Because if I see a judge who is barely taking notes for me, you know, and there's a speaker and it's just actively head down writing notes all the time, I'm going to be worried that I haven't done as great as that other speaker as well. So it's really, really important that you're mindful of this when it comes to actively listening and taking notes as well. Under note taking, we highlighted 3 essential elements. We said you had to make sure to prioritize clarity. We also said that you had to make sure to prioritize being thorough in the way that you take your notes. And then finally, you've got to be super strategic with the way that you take your notes. Okay, be cognizant of the clashes in the room. There was a to do here. If you're a novice debater, try as much as possible to watch practice rounds. Okay. Yes, so many materials online. Try as much as possible to watch so many of them. Try try to drag out the clashes by yourselves. Try to decipher what the key clashes in the round are. You get better by practicing. Okay, you get really, really better by practicing. This also cannot be overemphasized. So please do that. Okay. And then we talked about practical cases when it comes to personal feedback, the kind of questions that you would typically expect and how to answer them. Okay. On questions of what they did well, we said not to flatter. You know, don't spice people up. That's not what you do when you're trying to get them to be better. You should make sure that you're giving them concrete feedback, concrete to-dos that they can actually take into the next round as well. Okay, we also talked about how to provide helpful feedback, okay, as to what they did do particularly well. I said, always make sure you refer back to your notes in case of challenges. So it doesn't look like you're just deliberately trying to put them down. You should be able to cross-reference if the need comes up. And there was a to-do here as well. Try as much as possible to be a well-rounded and balanced debater. Try to stay updated on the news, okay? And I know that a lot of debaters hate this, but you really need IR. Like you need IR information. Most of you will have information on sports, on pop culture, because these are your artists. You will have information on beliefs and narratives, because you guys like relationships and love. But not so many people are paying attention to IR apart from like the really popular ones that you can't avoid. Try as much as possible to know what's going on, uh, even just beyond your continent. Okay, um, if you're European, try to know what's going on in Africa. If you're African, try to know what's going on in Europe. Like try as much as possible to understand global politics and stay on top of it. It would honestly help you flow better as a judge in this kind of debate as well. Okay, go for and prioritize the areas that you're not so well abreast on. I think it just helps you be an all-round debater and helps you actually provide useful feedback on what they could have done better in this kind of very technical and detailed motions. Okay. We also talked about the ethics as well. Please remember to be professional and respectful of people. Remember to keep an open mind. Okay. And we talked about finally the technical aspects of it. Do not overshare when it comes to personal feedback. Okay. Be mindful that we are running a tournament. We've got logistics to cater for. People have got the next round to be at. Okay. If it's the case that you just have so much to say and these debaters actually want to hear from you as well, reschedule. Okay, reschedule. Please do not make the tournament run behind because of personal feedback. We do appreciate the value of it. I mean, I'm taking a workshop on it. I do appreciate the value of it. We all do, but please do not use an excuse to delay logistics, right? People have got rounds to be at, they've got other things to do. So try as much as possible to be brief and concise. 10 to 20 minutes. 20 is even a lot, guys. Maybe 10 minutes per team, per speaker, okay, should be the max. Anything longer than that, try to postpone to another time during socials, online, a VM they can listen to as they walk to briefings the next morning. Just try to keep this under wraps as well. And finally, keep your notes. Keep your notes, okay? Don't be in a hurry to discard your notes until you've given everyone feedback. My recommendation, try as much as possible to hold onto your notes for the duration of the entire tournament. And with that, we've come to the end of the workshop. Thank you so much for listening, and I do hope this was helpful for you. I don't know if anyone would want to reach out to me who sees this, but I am on Facebook. That's the easiest way to reach out to me. And thank you so much again, Martha, as well, for this initiative and this opportunity as well.